you have all the optionality. You can sign a label deal. You can take an advance. We don't take a piece of that. We're not your business partner. We're your financing partner. We're your bank partner, right? We just provide the infrastructure and the payments, and we get out of the way. We let you make your decisions for yourself.
Episode 10 of Invest in Music with Damian Manning. Today we talk about HIFI, a tool that allows artists to see their earnings in real time and their new product called Cashflow. We talk about the future of earning money as an artist and what it looks like to be able to build an independent career in the world of Web3 and music today. Damian's a serial entrepreneur who has a background at MTV. In this episode, we talk all about their new Cashflow product, what it means for independent artists, and how to be building a business from the ground up. Really excited about this episode, so without further ado, let's get into it. Episode 10 with Damian Manning of HIFI. Damian, welcome to the podcast, man. How are we feeling?
Good. Thrilled to be here, Cooper.
Excited to have you. I'm excited for everyone to learn a little bit more about HIFI. It's a product that I am super excited about, and I feel like has been flying a little bit under the radar. So without further ado, why don't you give a quick background on yourself and maybe tell us a little bit more about HIFI?
Yeah, sure. I'm a software engineer by trade, serial entrepreneur, been operating in music tech, for most of my career in music, growing up in bands, just always really respected musicians, right? Artists, people that create music, and just well aware of the plight of folks who make money in music, that challenge of understanding how you earn a living making music and distributing it online and streaming it through the services. So, starting HIFI was really about helping the creator class of music understand their business model, right? How you put music out there, how you make money doing it as a living, given that it's so hard to track those income streams. You get paid, so far in arrears, all the delays. Spotify, Apple Music, the DSPs don't pay you. They pay third parties, middlemen, that account you and pay you months after the fact or longer, depending on, how successful you are, what type of label deal you have, et cetera. So we set out to build technology that connected those dots on behalf of the creator to show them in one place what they're earning across the entire market, and then ultimately help them get that money faster. And that's, one of the things we're most excited about.
Well, I'm really excited to dive into what that means for artists today. You guys just had this Cashflow product that came out that I'm really excited about. Before we do that, let's go back to the beginning. You mentioned that you were a serial entrepreneur, that you had been in bands in the past. What is your earliest relationship with music, and how did that lead into you becoming a founder?
Yeah, that's a great question. My dad had a hi-fi system when I was a kid and was always putting on great music. So at the earliest age I can remember, my parents were blasting music around the house. I had family members who made music for a living, so understood what that was like as a relative of a creator in the industry, and how tough it was to earn a living, with your passion pursuing your art. In high school, in bands, making music, realizing that wasn't my talents, that wasn't my skill. It was hard work. I really enjoyed it, but wasn't so great at it. And looking around at other peers who had that gift to write a song, to perform on stage, and just always, had such great respect for folks with that type of talent. For me, it was the technology. I learned how to program as a kid early on, self-taught. My dad brought home a TRS-80 from the office, right? And hacked into it, figure out how to play games and write software. And it was always, the mission for me was, how do I figure out how to marry the technology with the music? So at an early age, I got turned on to electronic music, bands like 9 Inch Nails, Depeche Mode, then like acid house, dance music, house music, the rave scene in the 90s and late 90s. One thing led to another, and ended up at MTV after a couple startups, which was fun. And that really helped me understand the licensing issues behind the scenes in music, and how convoluted that process was, and why artists didn't make money, right? Or didn't understand how they make money. So that was the first introduction to me to the web of complexity and challenges that music creators face.
It's really interesting because I feel like you've seen the evolution of music software and music tech for a few kind of phases now. You've seen everything from, like you said, MTV being really this focal point for how music was distributed into the streaming era. And obviously we're talking a lot about Web3 these days. Curious to hear for that time and place when MTV was kind of the hotspot for music itself. Can you explain to people who aren't familiar, like what that meant for a record and the impact that had once you were kind of in orbit in the MTV world?
Yeah, nothing had the power of breaking artists and songs like MTV. Label executives used to beg and plead MTV to air these tracks, right? And the amazing thing about MTV is there was no contract or rights agreement between MTV and the labels or the rights owners in the music industry. It was just a, quid pro quo type operation for the most part. But MTV had this incredible power and sway over the market. And then even, by the time I was at MTV in the late 90s, it was still the number one music brand around the globe. It was the number one music related website, search, on Yahoo and, even early Google days, right? We built the first internet radio platform that was personalized. We had online music video content in the early days of video codecs, right? Streaming over ISDN lines and dial-up modems. So there was all this innovation around MTV because it was the place people went to for music. The MTV channels, right, still aired a lot of music. MTV2 was exclusively music at the time. All that shifted obviously away to different kind of original programming. Some of that was, due to the licensing challenges that the company Viacom faced negotiating with the record labels, who at that point said, hey, Napster changed everything. We want to button up all the distribution channels, right, that we have for our music. And MTV, essentially said, we don't want to play that game. We don't want to pay all that money. So to hell with this, and really start focusing on different kind of content.
Do you think that's kind of why MTV's impact on music started to decline, is because they basically just said, we don't want to deal with this whole payout licensing world and we're just going to stop prioritizing music as a category?
I mean, I can't, I don't have the authority to speak to the overall decision-making process from the board, Viacom and the leadership at MTV. But I would say that in my experience, that was a big part of the problem, right?
Yeah.
None of that had been commercialized. And it came a point in time when the record labels and publishers and rights owners became much more sensitive to that dynamic because of what Napster did to the marketplace, and wanted to change things, reset that relationship. And, if you have to sit down and negotiate massive, right, agreements with the rights owners, who at the time were freaking out and losing control over distribution, it's you can understand why MTV may have taken a step back and realized, hey, we can own and operate our own content. That just leads to much higher margins. Like, why are we playing this game with the record labels?
Right. And it does speak to kind of the power of disruptive technology and how we consume entertainment, in this case, music. And I think one thing that's really interesting about you is you mentioned that you're a software engineer, you have a music background. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience as a serial entrepreneur. When did you start to get passionate about building your own products around music technology?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was the first time I picked up like a drum kit, as a kid, and like a sampler and all that sort of electronic music gear. I realized, all that software, right, underneath. The power of making your own music and writing all that technology and software for, creators to express themselves it's just so amazing to me. And as a kid, it was, how do I do something like that? How do I create software for artists? How do I help people express their creativity and, that artistic outlook? And as I was trying to build those types of things and hack those type of projects with friends in high school, that's when I realized that was my creative outlook. It was the creation of the software that was my expression, right? My art form, so to speak, not the music itself. And so it was, very young age that, that obsession sort of took hold for me to build solutions for artists. I think what happened to me in my career was with MTV, I got set on a bit more of a corporate track very quickly, thinking differently about how you build a business and how you monetize. And it was, MTV and, so many other media companies out there are just so extractive in the world, right? They find a way to identify talent and then extract as much value from the talent as possible and pocket as much of that as they can along the way. The record labels, the publishers, right? They all provide invaluable services at some level, right? Varying degrees. they do things that artists can't do on their own, that managers can't do on their own, that, other partners are just not as good at. Like if you need global radio promotion, who's going to do it better than a major record label? But at the same time, they take a huge pound of flesh in the process, right? And they force you to give up so many rights and so much decision-making power over your own career that for me, it was, that shift of, hey, having spent so much time helping to like establish that side of the model, how do I change things and flip the power back to the artist? And what can I do next to restore, the power and decision-making to the creator? So that's what really led me ultimately to HIFI, was the experience helping and supporting and endorsing the middlemen, right, that take their cut, and then finding a way to sort of shift my gears and my interest to building more towards the creator class directly.
And I find that approach to the problem really compelling because I really resonate with what you said about being such a passionate fan about music. And maybe if you don't make the music, there's other ways to support creators and uplift artistry along the way. And I think specifically for people who aren't familiar with HIFI, why don't you give a little bit more color around what this means? If I'm an artist and I'm someone who's involved in the HIFI ecosystem, what does that mean for me in my career?
Yeah. So you can ask most artists, how they make money, and they can't tell you, or they'll tell you they make no money, right? If you'd ask an artist who's making some money, how much a song made on Spotify last year, they can't tell you. You ask an artist who signed you a major record label with a business manager, right? And business managers are a form of like accounting firms, effectively, that do the bookkeeping and tax filing on behalf of that artist. And these are artists that make, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars a year, and then some. If you ask that artist how much a song made on Spotify or Apple or in streaming, they can't answer. They turn to their business manager and say, how much did this track make last year on these services? The business manager says, give me a couple of weeks, I'll get back to you, right? There's just no technology in that world. Artists from the DIY level, breaking through all the way to the most successful artists in the world, don't understand their business models, and they turn to other forms of monetization, right? It's one of the reasons why NFTs and tokenization and fan clubs and Web3 and tickets and merch are so attractive to creators, because it's something they can control that in theory pays more immediately, right? We realize that there's still tens of billions of dollars flowing through the off-chain, right, traditional DSP, music streaming, radio play ecosystems. Demystifying that is a critical part of our mission. So if you're an artist in your HIFI orbit, you get access to software that helps you do just that, understand where your income is coming from. You can connect your distributors that you ship music with, your PRO, your pub admin, or your publisher, your sound exchange. If you're in the US market for digital performance, track all those streams in one place and answer the question on your own time, on demand, how much any given song or any given album or any release did in terms of dollars, not just, stream count, right? Not just follows, but money in your pocket. And so that's a core part of our offering. And then as we, got to understand more and more about how those streams flow through the ecosystem, we realized that we were potentially in a position to start accelerating those streams, right? If you're an artist with your music on Spotify today, you have fans engaging, streaming music now. Spotify will tell you how many listens you have today, but they won't tell you how much you're getting paid for those listens. To find out how much you get paid, you got to wait for your distributor or record label to tell you that months from now, right? And then they'll pay you. And if it's a label, they pay you months after that, right? 6-9 months in arrear or longer. So what we do is we can tell you how much money is in your pipeline, meaning how much money did you earn today? But you're not going to get paid for 3-4 months, 6-9 months, 12 months plus, depending on your role in the ecosystem, right? And so because we can identify the value of that pipeline, or what any other market would call receivables, because you're a business as an artist, we can start to accelerate those receivables. And that's what brings us to this exciting Cashflow product launch.
I love it. And I want to go really deep on the Cashflow product because it's such a compelling tool for artists. But before we do that, I just want to talk about how crazy it is that payments work the way they do in music. And I think it's something that we often hear about through the grapevine, but it's not something that's very common knowledge. I think that, to your point, the very basic question of how much did this song make on Spotify, not be able to answer that question is pretty crazy to me. And I think, as you mentioned, when you start to look at what it means to get paid as an artist, there are so many platforms you need to be familiar with, so many different logins and management systems that you have. And so for me, when I was able to really just hear about HiFi from you. This idea of really the central artist dashboard where you plug in all of your different earnings and you just have one place to see how much did I make as an artist from my music this month. It's a very basic thing when you think about it, but actually building something that allows you to see that full picture is very, very interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's something, you highlighted the fact that we're not asking you to upload a bunch of statements or plug in a bunch of numbers like a spreadsheet. You connect your account just like you would through Plaid and a fintech product, right? If you use Robinhood or a banking product and you want to link your Chase account, your Wells Fargo account, your Bank of America account, right? Your Amex account, for credit card, it's the same thing with HiFi. You select the services you work with, you plug in your credentials for each of them, and then we have automated technology that connects in, pulls down all the information we need to know. You don't have to lift a finger or plug in a number.
Well, I think something else that's compelling about it is that, we're in a world today where people are really excited about buying catalog. You see these major entities spending hundreds of millions, billions of dollars buying this crazy valuable catalog from the biggest superstars in the world. But, when it comes down to a more granular level, this product is not only for artists looking to see what they're getting paid on a monthly basis, but really allows you to value music in a very transparent way. And I think something like that allows us to really create efficient markets around music. And I think that precedent is very exciting for what it means to buy and sell music at large.
Yeah, and it's a great point. I mean, we set out to help the music creators first and foremost. And what we learned along the way is that the business management firms that I alluded to earlier that don't really have technology, they run a manual process. They have MBAs sitting in a room on repeat, downloading CSVs and building pivot tables and spreadsheets, right? It's not it's a very challenging, process fraught with like human error. We have built this automated technology layer that does that process for them. And so those business management firms have been coming to us and asking how they onboard into that same system. The funds that are investing billions of dollars in music catalog are coming to us asking for access to the same solution, right? Especially the funds who don't have expertise in music royalties. They own this assets that are throwing off, steady income, but they have no way to understand the value of the pipeline or when those payments are going to get to them and how. So our system demystifies that, those questions and provides those answers for that segment of the market, just as it does for the creator class as well.
It's really fascinating too, because someone like myself, you hear that 1 million streams on Spotify is roughly $3,700. And then you start to back into all this math around like, okay, if this song has 1 billion streams, how much does that make? Or if this song has 500 million streams, what does that make? Right. But then you start to realize that it's not only Spotify, there's also Apple, and then there's also Amazon, and you also have the syncs from it. And I think, like you said, this very basic question around like, how much did this song earn cross-platform, across any income stream, and what does that look like? It's crazy that there's not a more visible way to see that. And while it can be contentious to talk about the financialization of music, I think it's really important to bring up because in so many ways, these artists I think are constrained in terms of how we perceive their value because you really just can't see how much of the magic actually happens behind the scene that does create value in the first place.
Artists, the old saying sort of back in the day was artists just wait for the check to arrive in the mail, right? The check arrives, there's no accounting, they don't know why they get paid that amount. They have no way to really audit it, outside of like a label deal every few years. And that costs tens of thousands of dollars upfront to just risk the audit in the first place. No one has been able to hold these organizations accountable because there's no oversight. They just pay what they pay and you just sort of like take what you can get, right? Artists, I think, have the right idea that they're getting the short end of the stick, but people have a hard time really proving that because of how complex and convoluted the payment system is, right? And how far in arrears all these payments are. When you have access to something like HiFi's royalty dashboard, it provides you with the kind of insight that you can start to answer those questions yourself. And you can see where there's money missing. Hey, I got a payment from Spotify for this on the master side, but not on the mechanical side. Or I got these payments on the publishing side, but not on the PRO side. Like, why did that not happen? So it helps set you up to ask the right questions of your business partners to make sure you can hold them accountable without having to pay, tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket to hire an auditor to do that for you.
Right. And I think it goes onto the core fundamental root of the music industry as it exists today. I think in a lot of ways, there are examples of, labels being malicious and like intentionally not paying out money. But at the end of the day too, it's like, there's so many different songs that a label deals with. There's so many different payouts. There's so many different ways that it gets collected that 6 to 9 month lag process is not necessarily labels trying to withhold money from you. It's just really fucking hard to make sense of. And so I think even like a product like this, it's really refreshing to me because it's not only directly for an artist, but it's actually solving a foundational problem in the industry, which is how is money routed around all these different organizations, and how do we make that
Right.
more efficient over time?
And transparent, right, for
Mm-hmm.
all the stakeholders in the entire like value chain. And that's been a problem because the record labels have a process for making these calculations and figure out how to pay artists. And it is a heavy lift. It takes time to figure that out. The PROs, right, they have these huge weeks long sprints to figure out all the accounting, get all the money lined up to send each, creator or songwriter's account. It's a real challenge, it's a real burden, but they do it all in secrets. They do it all in like opaque behind the scenes. They don't show their work, so to speak, right? So as a creator, you have no way to know if they're doing it correctly. And it leads to a lot of concern. People have rightly so about what's actually happening behind the scenes, if they're getting paid, what they're worth. I think for us, like one thing that we emphasize somebody to keep in mind is you talk to doing the math of, hey, if I earn this much for these many streams, what would it be for a billion streams, et cetera? The challenge with that kind of way of thinking is that the calculation for payouts at the DSPs is not linear, right? It's a pool-based accounting. Spotify can't pay out more money than revenue it takes in. And so if there's more streaming activity this month than there was last month, you got to do the math. They can only pay per stream what they can afford. So the per stream payout adjusts based on their revenue and based on the stream counts across their entire ecosystem. And then if you look at a territorial level, some markets pay a lot less for Spotify than others, right? So if you're in Brazil, your subscription fee is way less if you're a consumer. Ad supported model might be like much more dominant. And so there's even less money to go around. So artist popularity and territory, right, time of year, time of day, the month it is, right, how active other streamers are on the platform, how many releases there are that month across or around the whole world. Those are all factors that go into calculating how much an artist will earn from a listen.
It's really fascinating because we talked about MTV and the licensing world and how complicated that was. It feels like now with the emergence of streaming, we kind of have a new set of challenges. And I guess if we look at this from a little bit more of an abstract point of view, how do you see HIFI kind of evolving in line with new technologies and new ways of monetizing music over time?
Yeah, look, when I talked about the demystification for artists to understand how they make money in music, right? Like how they build a business and how they make decisions, data-driven business decisions around that. Web3, for example, blockchain just plugs right in, just like another revenue stream for us. We're huge fans of some of the innovators out there in that world, and it's something that we don't have the expertise to build those systems ourselves. We leave that to, best of breed builders out there that are doing that on their own. When the time is ready, we're happy to plug those feeds into our engine so that those media creators can see the money they're making on chain alongside the money they're making off chain. And I think, we realize perhaps more than others in the market at the get-go, but I think now, some folks in Web3 and blockchain have sort of caught up to this fact that as much as Web3 can represent a huge revolution and empowerment for creators to control their revenue streams and monetize their fan base and their music, it's going to take time for that shift to take hold. And for the foreseeable future, a huge portion of artist income is still earned off-chain. And so HIFI becomes this incredible like bridge, to sort of bridge that gap so you can see both those types of revenue streams in one place.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's really exciting because on-chain payments using smart contracts or royalties, it feels like a no-brainer to me. But to your point, there's so much complexity involved with that being a cohesive system. And more importantly, it takes time for there to be actual money flowing through those systems. Like the idea of smart contracts is one thing. People tangibly putting enough value into it to make this be an ecosystem that people are excited about and that major labels are interested in playing around with, that's going to take time. I think on my end, we're really looking at 3 to 5 year game until a lot of the music in the world is on chain, until it's generating significant on chain income. And so for something like HIFI, I think that it's in a really interesting position because you're almost tackling a lot of the problems that smart contracts solve by trying to understand how to make technology around that in the world that exists today. So that when it does come time for there to actually be on-chain revenue that's significant and worth accounting for, you can almost kind of, as you said, bridge these two worlds together and basically have this world where you can see what an artist is making on Spotify alongside what they're making on sound. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether or not it was off chain or on chain. All that matters is that the
Is
artist
it?
is getting paid.
Exactly. That's right.
Yep. And so I want to kind of go into Cashflow as the most recent product that you guys have rolled out because, as you
That,
alluded to, HiFi has been building this incredible royalty dashboard where you can go in and say, hey, I made $10,000 off this song on Spotify. As you alluded to, the issue with that was that you can see that you made $10,000, but you can't actually get your $10,000. And I think this is something interesting that Cashflow helps to solve. So I'd love for you to maybe give an overview on what the product is and then how it benefits artists that are using it.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I'll start back at the beginning. So if you're an artist today and you're looking to finance your career, you need access to liquidity to fund, whether it's like merch, printing, album recording, a tour, promotion, what have you. Artists have needs and need access to capital. Well, you can't just walk into your Main Street bank and ask for a loan or a small business investment or loan, right? That's just not going to happen in the music industry, primarily because banks don't understand artist income streams. They don't understand royalty streams. They don't understand how to value that and underwrite that. That's historically been a problem in the music industry from day one. So it's left the financing of artists to historically loan sharks, right? It's why the mob was so involved in the record label and publishing business early on in sort of the early days of rock and roll, right? And then ultimately the record label adopted similar sort of model. To be fair, again, they provide invaluable services to the artists they sign, no doubt, right? They're not just stealing money from them in that respect, in the mob style, but they force the artist to give up a lot in that process. So artist signs with record label, they get an advance, they can use that money, put it towards their career, but they give up control. They're signing to usually like multiple release cycles with that organization. That organization controls their image and likeness decisions, promotional decisions, marketing decisions, recording decisions, right? Mixing decisions. So you give up a lot of the control of the creative process that perhaps helped you become the artist you were, right? Do you really want to have a business partner that's making decisions for you suddenly, right? Overnight. And that's unfortunately the situation many artists that sign with labels or, end up in, right? Again, because there aren't many other great options out there. So what's happened with the advent of these technology platforms, they've figured out ways to underwrite artists and provide advances without having to mortgage your rights. So there are companies out there that will cut you a check for 10 grand, 20 grand, right? Whatever. And to do that, you pay huge fees that compound over time. You give up a percentage in many cases of how much money you earn over the next couple of years as an artist. And it's not to complain that those companies are, predatory or taking advantage. They're taking huge risks as well. They're modeling your future performance based on what you've done in the past. And if you're a frontline artist that doesn't have a lot of history, there's huge error bars in those forecasts. So you don't really know. It's an A&R process. And those companies have to give you that money, and that sits a liability on their book until they recoup in the future. So they need real upside. They have to hope you overperform their calculation. And as an artist, you give up a lot of that upside as a result. So is it better than having to, give up those rights with the record labels? In many cases, sure, it's a better deal. But we thought we could do one step better than that. And with our technology, because it's so unique, the way it plugs into all these different channels within the ecosystem, we realized that we can spot the royalty streams, not that you got paid just in the past, but we can spot those royalty streams as you're earning them in real time. And so we don't have to take a big risk and say, hey, based on past performance, we think tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, you're going to make this much money. We can say, hey, we've calculated that you've made this much money 1 second ago, right? Which means we can actually pay you the money you're earning every couple seconds in real time. And so the way Cashflow works, and there's just nothing like this, as an independent artist to start with, and as an independent recording artist out of the gate, but we'll support producers and songwriters soon as well. You can link us to your Spotify for Artists team, connect us to your distributor, and then we can tell you in real time how much money you're making. If you sign up, we create a bank account for you in your name, and we just start depositing that money into your account as you earn it and your fans stream your music. So no longer waiting for weeks or months or a year to get paid. You're literally getting paid in real time. And we take a 5% fee on every dollar that we underwrite. And every excess dollar that we don't underwrite, right, or we didn't count on in our calculation, as it flows through, we just pass that into your bank account and we don't take any fee from it at all.
It's amazing. And I think the one thing that I really want to highlight there is being able to be paid in real time for your music sounds like a very basic concept, but it's something that hasn't existed for the history of music. But I think being able to even just have something that's automatically paying you and you're not having to go and collect. One of the biggest problems that I see with independent artists today is that they don't know where to go to press the button to withdraw. Like they don't know if a check's coming in. They don't know if they have money that's unclaimed. And I think this ability to set up a bank account where it's saying, hey, plug in some information and then we're just going to make sure you get paid when you're supposed to get paid and get paid in real time along the way. It's such a huge unlock for independent artists.
And you can pause it, you can cancel anytime. There's no penalty. We're not signing to long-term contracts. You can withdraw the money from the account. You can spend it with this cool HIFI Visa card, Visa debit card that we have rolling out, right? So you have all the optionality. You can sign a label deal. You can take an advance. We don't take a piece of that. We're not your business partner. We're your financing partner. We're your bank partner, right? We just provide the infrastructure and the payments and we get out of the way. We let you make your decisions for yourself.
And you touched on something in explaining the way that artists are earning today that I really want to highlight. In a lot of ways, we think about artists signing record deals to go and make these crazy albums that are going streaming globally. But I think the issue that I see more is that most artists here in LA sign record deals to pay their rent. They sign a record deal so that they can get $10,000 to pay their next 3 months of rent. And I think that's where you start to see a lot of depression come from artists is because they're basically just signing in their next deal to cover their living expenses. And I think that's a very, very dangerous world to be operating from.
Yeah, it's unfortunately true. There was somebody I worked with in the music business years ago who would say the challenge you have with creators is they have to, beg, borrow, steal, right, to get ahead in so many ways because no one's investing in, every artist, right? And you can't get a loan from a bank, and so how do you get access to liquidity? Well, if you're working a job, you have perhaps enough to pay your rent and cover your expenses. You very rarely have enough to indulge your talent or your side project, right? And the truth is, for many artists, music starts out as a side project because of that, because they have to first earn a living, right, and make sure they can live effectively, and being able to earn enough money to afford to really invest in a music career is just a challenge that many artists face, and so they cut deals out of necessity that they know are not in their best interest, because they have few other options so that they can actually take that leap and make music their full-time gig because they have the talent to pull it off, but very few people believe in them enough to actually put their money, at risk. What HIFI, the hope of HIFI, Cashflow, right, is that if artists are just perpetually getting paid in real time, that means if you, do a bunch of promotion online or you drive a bunch of fans to a streaming service or you do a big online stunt or release, you're going to see the payment and the upside, the monetary upside of that in real time as it's happening. And so you don't have to wait months to capitalize on those opportunities. You can put that money to work straight away and just build on that momentum in a way that in the past you couldn't unless you mortgaged those rights to third parties to take that risk with you.
It's a great example because even thinking about the role that TikTok plays in the music industry today, let's say that you have a viral song and you get 5 million streams overnight. The reality is today you're not going to see any additional income from that for many months in advance. And then in that in-between phase of those many months, that's when you start to get record labels reaching out. And that's when an artist says, okay, well, I'm broke right now. I got 10 million streams on this TikTok song, but I don't have $1 in my bank account. So I'm going to go sign my next 3 albums away. And then you wake up in 5 years and this artist is still in debt because they signed a deal a month after they had a viral hit on TikTok.
There's a great story, I won't name names, but one of the more successful independent artists in the world, independent recording artists in the world, has a great story where, he had a big hit that got playlisted on Spotify, massive success story. And while that was happening, all the major labels came to him with proposal after proposal after proposal. And he didn't know what to do. And he was struggling because he didn't want to give up rights and control. And at the end of the day, he waited it out long enough just because he was so challenged trying to make the right decision. By the time 4 months goes by, and by the way, at that point, no longer playlisted, the decay rate is massive. He's no longer making as much money online, losing momentum with this fan base, right, as a result. But by the time he was on the verge of signing with a major, all of a sudden, boom, that money showed up, 3.5 months later in his distributor account. And he was able to tap into it, not sign with a label, and then stay independent to this day as a result, right? And if that artist had access to something like Cashflow, he would have never had that multi-month period of like instability and, questioning like his career decisions and wondering what to do, and would have been able to capitalize on all that amazing momentum as it happened when his track first broke and got playlisted.
Yeah, it really begs the question of how artists would operate their business differently if they had all of their capital available up front. If they didn't have to worry about signing a deal to be able to think about producing their next couple albums, if they didn't have to sign a deal to go and make music videos. It's like, it just challenges the structure of what it means to operate as a business, because I think in a lot of ways, artists are always operating from like, how do I maximize the next thing and the next thing after that? But, maybe to take this a little bit to the lens of Web3 and NFTs, I think the biggest unlock has been when you sell an NFT, you get paid in real time. And so artists have this, ETH or these dollars in their bank account. And I'm not going to sit here and say that all these artists are genius on knowing how to spend it. In fact, most of them suck at spending it. But I do think that the difference there is that it's your money. You're not spending someone else's money. And I think in a lot of ways, I see this really weird relationship with labels where artists are like, they're in label deals and they're like, hey, I'm just going to spend the money because it's not mine, it's the labels, but it is yours at the end of the day. Like, you're just going more in debt. Right. And then there's all this resentment because you owe this label all this money you didn't recoup, but then the artist is like, fuck the label, they didn't do anything to me. And the label clearly is like, yeah, we put all this money into you and you didn't make it back for us. Like, why should we keep investing in you? And so it creates this really dissonant relationship where there's just all this hostility around it. And I think if we remove this need to advance such significant capital ahead of a project being completed and instead focus on what is my capital available today based on my existing performance, I think it really allows artists to grow and scale their teams in a much more sustainable way than trying to overextend and get into these situations where they put themselves in a really, really deep hole.
Well said. And look, and, to add to that and getting back to something I mentioned earlier, when an artist takes an advance, artists think about it as somebody else's money, like you said. And because of that, perhaps you don't make the best decisions on how to spend that capital. And so too often artists will go and spend that money only to discover they've run out of that money and they can't come back to the well to get more, right? And then they end up in a situation where things are just like frozen, or the label has even more leverage and control over them, right? So I think, one of the additional benefits of the sort of real-time payment is you eat what you kill, right? To some degree, right? It's like you're getting paid like based on how you perform, but you're getting the money right away. But it also forces you to be a bit more disciplined in how you spend that money, right? So you make smarter decisions for yourself because you can see what's coming and you're on the hook, right? As opposed to, again, taking somebody else's money, spending it all, finding out it's all gone, and then they control your rights for the next few years and there's no one else got to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, let's take it down another level too, which is to say that getting an advance from a label is in a lot of ways seen as a major win for an artist. They'll wake up one morning and have $1 million in their bank account. And they're like, oh, I made it as an artist because I just got this $1 million paycheck. But you have to earn that. And then more so than that, if you think about the economics around your team, managers operate on commission. Managers are incentivized to go out there and get you the biggest payday possible because they're getting 20% of it. And I think in a lot of ways, I've noticed that if you look at the dynamics around music, it's really kind of messed up because artists are almost being used as like leverage to go and get the largest check possible so that everyone around you can eat on that. But what happens is you bring that check in, your manager gets 20%, your business manager gets this, your lawyer gets this, etc. Now as an artist, you're left with half of what you thought you were going to get. That's meant to last you for the next 3 years. And look, most of these artists are not savvy enough to think about how to spend, $500,000 over a 3-year basis. They don't think about burn rate. They don't think about like hiring anything. And so they go blow a bag, buy some new clothes, buy a car, whatever it might be. Now you got 50 grand to go and make your next 3 albums. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you wonder why this artist doesn't put music out for the last year. It's because they're in this psychological hole with themselves because they just didn't know how to spend their money, quite frankly.
Yeah, look, it's it's a tough one. I'll pack that like a couple different parts. The second part first. I think, if you're an artist, you've been starving for quite some time in most cases, right? So you can't blame artists. It's human nature to want to go out and like buy that car, to feel like you made it, to spend money like you made it, and to show off like you made it. You can't blame people. We all kind of have that urge and tendency. It's kind of like some people, who go to college that day, they show off at, orientation. The credit card companies have those booths and tables, like outside campus, and you sign up, you get that credit card, and you're like, oh, I'm an adult now, I got a card, I'm going to buy a bunch of shit. Until you realize, oh, you got to pay that bill one day. That all comes home to roost, right? So it's a similar mindset. You can't blame people. It's human nature. The other end of that, with managers, I think, there are amazing music managers out there, artist managers that do great service and great work, right? Take care of all the shit behind the scenes, scoop the shit up behind the elephant, right? In many ways, they do the dirty work. It's not a very glorious job. Managers have to pay bills. Like in many cases, they have rent to pay. They have people they employ. They also have families to feed. So it's again, human nature as a manager to want to cut the biggest deal you can to pay your bills, because most managers are borrowing, stealing to keep the lights on and to keep the artist feeling comfortable and focused and confident about their future, while they're, struggling to pay the phone bill behind the scenes and don't want the artist to kind of know what's happening, right? Because their job is to insulate the artist from all that bullshit. So it's just the way the system has worked and perpetuated the cycle, and the labels, all these guys, they just take advantage of that asymmetry. Like this is all compounds on the fact that the guys that have the capital and the services just cut better deals for themselves because they can. And so again, the transparency that we bring to the table with the financing and like how you make money in music, understand what your assets and the music control is worth, and then understanding how much is in your pipeline, your receivables that have yet to been accounted to or paid to you, and then let you access that money as you earn it. We hope that with time, that will just change the whole paradigm so that folks are used to getting that money, that free cash flow coming in all day long, and can plan and model around that, as opposed to having to plan and model around those advances that, as you say, at the end of the day, after everybody takes their cut, after the taxes, et cetera, there's not a lot left. And when you want to spend a little to feel like you earned it because you did, then what's left to invest in your career? Very little. Right.
And I think if we zoom out, part of the reason I'm so excited about HIFI is that it really challenges artists to rethink the way that they structure and grow their business. The name of this podcast, Invest in Music. I'm personally really excited about this idea of investing in artists. We recently did this investment in an artist named Daniel Allen. And I think a reason why I want to bring this up is that for me, being able to have more transparency around what an artist earns allows there to be a lot more clear business decisions made around financing and capitalizing an artist project. And if we look at that from all sides of the puzzle, I'm optimistic about a world where an artist has a company bank account. They're using that company bank account to pay employees that are working for them full time. Those employees have upside in their career in the form of equity. And there's sort of like a more formal and standardized process around how to run a business as an artist. Whereas today, to your point, I don't think there really is like a standard process around that. I think most artists don't know when and where they're getting paid. They get money in the door and then they figure out how to spend it on their next project, versus operating from this point of like, okay, let me actually analyze where all my income is coming in. Let me see how many total dollars I have available. Let me see how I can use that to go and hire and do the things that I need to do. I think it sets such a powerful precedent, because as an investor, me being able to go to an artist's royalty dashboard, and if I'm considering investing in them, say, hey, let me just take a look at not only what you earned in the past, but what are you going to be earning over the next 6 to 12 months? And how do I use that to back into a quote unquote valuation for what this company is worth? Because that's really what this is at the end of the day. I think it just unlocks a whole new capital market. And I think creating markets for music is something that we haven't really seen publicly so far. And I think a tool like HIFI is really well positioned to help bring those conversations front and center.
Yeah, agree with everything you just said. And you get the benefit of having a business bank account that have all your royalty streams flowing through it. So as an investor, you can see not just, the accounting and the financial analytics, but actually the dollars coming in and when they arrive, and, who's paying them.
That's right. And I think something that I'm really excited about for HIFI is that, the way that you position the company so far is everyone that has used the product is ecstatic about it. And I feel like you've been very curated in terms of who's actually been using this so far, in terms of how you guys grow and learn from your users. I know with this Cashflow product, it's kind of a new chapter because you're really opening it up and allowing more people to get their hands involved. For people who have made it this far into the episode, what's the best way for them to get involved with the Cashflow ecosystem and to really take that next step with HIFI as a whole?
Yeah, you go to a website, money.hi.fi, money.hi.fi. There's a wait list. You can sign up. Our team will be in touch. And as we roll out the product, we're going to onboard as many artists as we can. System.
I love it. Well, it's definitely been a pleasure to talk about this. Like I said, I think that HIFI is one of the best kept secrets in the music industry today. So I'm really excited for more artists to get their hands on here. And honestly, Damian, I mean, every time I talk to you, it's just clear that you see this so clearly. And I think for a lot of founders in music, they have this vision of where the industry will go, but they don't actually have the wherewithal to build something that actually enables that to happen. And I think one thing that I'm just continually impressed by with HiFi is, you've built a product that's already serviced so many incredible artists and so many incredible partners, but it feels like we're really just at the tip of the iceberg. So I'm really excited to help get a lot more artists onboarded here. And I think that it's going to be a very exciting year. So I just appreciate you taking some time to share more about it.
Thanks so much, Cooper. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, once again, guys, if you're interested in learning more, go ahead and check out money.hi.fi. Best place to get involved. And Damian, I really look forward to keeping this conversation going in the months to come.
Thanks, Cooper. Likewise.
All right, guys. Cheers.